Hi, hello. So I decided to rewrite the Russian sleep experiment in the vein of Pastra's rewrite of Jeff the Killer. I wanted to take a crack at a classic creepypasta, and I realized something. It's actually a pretty competently written story. Okay, no, it's not, but I decided I didn't need to do too much to it to make it more effective. I reframed the story from a different perspective, a less reporterly one, and more of a passive, horrified observer. Um, Let me know what you think. The Russian Sleep Experiment, a rewrite by Rotten Source Horror Channel. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, some of its former elements gave us intelligence. Some willingly, some not. You get the gist, CIA doing its part and the like. A lot of that intel wasn't usable, just old nothing burgers of experiments, usually more cruel than practical or more eccentric than either of the two. I won't even get into the other genres of intel we got because they won't be relevant for this, but when it came to the sciences, we got handed off some rare instances of workable studies and we needed to process it. I was usually at the start of that process, given an initial review of what to do with something, shred it, keep it, pursue it. Of course, I never got final say, but my work carried some weight. You could hardly tell the difference at first glance from the good data and the bad. That's just how they ran these things in the 40s. And we were stuck cleaning up the mess they made of their data 50 years later. Half the time, they didn't even have half of their records still intact. I blame the sycophancy of the regime for it. There was this one project. I can't remember its name. I remember it translated to some long-winded scientific diatribe that ended in forever soldiers. It's a novel idea. A Hollywood idea. Soldiers that didn't need to sleep, didn't need to die. Body could get torn apart and crawl its way back to get rearmed. It could go back to the field after some TLC and keep killing. It. Not they or he or she. It. What they wanted to make couldn't be called a human being. Again, I say that they had a novel idea. Forever soldiers fighting forever wars. The way things are makes me shudder to imagine what the world would look like if we had chosen to embrace such a thing rather than bury it. I doubt they would have used it any more responsibly than us, though. They tried everything. Acid, torture, acid then torture, acid then torture, then being relieved from supervision, still tripping on acid. Most found a means of self-disposal. Gassing to death and resurrection, that failed, usually at the resurrection stage. The whole project relied on the idea that they could kill a man and then bring the corpse back to a sleepless eternity. Or that removing one's ability to dream or even catch a wink would make them a god among men. I liken the whole project to the mysticism of the Nazis or some similar trite derangement of the times. Their findings were hard for our informants to dredge up in full, scattered place to place. I guess because the Soviets didn't like what they saw. That they had found in something untenable to face in their glorified executions. When I'd first read it all, I certainly can say I didn't much like the findings neither. I'll do my best to recall details, but the whole thing's best forgotten, even if I can't help but disclose. I'm probably gonna get all sorts of statements and facts wrong. from the order of events to the sciences behind it, to the magics they thought they could harness. It's been 30 years since it came across my desk. All I ask is some grace. Our story begins with missing data. Shocker. They thought they could make a gas that'd keep men awake with no significant side effects, apart from those of sleep deprivation. They made their gas, but the chemical formula and manufacturing process are lost to us, thank you, Lord. I believe this was a state-led facility with a military presence. Maybe special forces, but the equivalent of the military police handled most of the grunt work. Small team of researchers and medical staff all on a grant. Due to the nature of their experiment and the expected complications, each was armed with a personal defense weapon in the form of a Makarov with 2 spare mags should they need the ammo. There was a control group of 5 men. They wouldn't be exposed to the gas, but they would be kept awake by any normal means available. Nothing untoward happened to these men, save for the typical torture associated with sleep debt, according to what we could dig up, so I don't feel the need to dive into their story much. It's the actual test group we gotta focus on. These 5 men were wartime terrorists, according to the Soviets. They were promised their freedom upon completing their stay as subjects of this experiment. They were placed in a closed system, ventilated room. The gas would cycle in and out constantly, reused and refilled, I think as needed refilled. They needed to be careful about the concentration of the gas compared to normal breathable air, monitored pretty much exclusively through oxygen concentration in the room and oxygen usage by the subjects. I can't be quoted on it, though. The shit was basically magic to my understanding. The room was monitored through a reinforced observation window and microphones. Closed-circuit cams existed at the time, but they weren't spared for this project. The subjects had all the appropriate amenities for a quality life. Enough dried food for the first month, running water, appropriate toiletries, shower, latrine, entertainment in the form of novels, cots, bedding, and even lounging furniture was listed. They really wanted the only variable for these men to be the gas. The whole experiment was a crack job from the start because of their approach to the control group, though. At that point, I was doubting the efficacy of this project's data. I don't know what the record for days without sleep was in 1951, but the researcher team did. And they set out with the goal of first reaching a 30-day midpoint and then pushing to 60 as circumstances allowed it. The available records detailed the 21st day of the experiment as being the last. The current world record is 18 days, I think. It may really be slightly higher, but no lower than that. The data they cataloged for the first 5 days flagged something irregular. That the men hadn't begun displaying any symptoms of sleep deprivation and made no complaints to themselves or each other. I hazard to agree that it was a peculiar start. I doubt any man would be in his right mind after not sleeping for 120 hours. You'd expect something. Rambling, or maybe nodding, or micro-sleeps, or irritability. Nothing. That nothing became a fixation of the Soviets on that day. Because the gas wasn't supposed to do that. The researchers were pondering the possibility of the gas having properties they didn't account for. Again, I ain't got the mind for biochem, so it's above me what specifically had them so disquieted. The men were even surveyed on the 6th day. One had started to get pangs in his head, like tension headaches or something. I can't recall the exact symptoms, only that the lead researcher, Dr. Karamov or some other close-sounding name, noted the delay of onset. On the 8th day, the subjects were reported to have gotten desperate for sleep and complaining. From that, I guess that the gas the Soviets had developed wasn't affecting the men anymore, that it wasn't working right or well. I don't know what I thought. I just remember it felt like a sharp turn, that it was noted as such by the researchers too. It isn't like I knew what to make of the findings in all reality. Maybe this was what they expected to happen sooner. The men were quoted by their initials. I'll paraphrase. No way I remember their exact words. No way I'd even remember how I translated them originally. I got the initials wrong too, probably. But I'll keep those consistent here. TA. I'm growing tired of this. AM. Do you think they care? They're Soviets. I doubt they're even listening to us. FK. I sold magazines. Sticks in pine. I got a life to get back to. They're gonna kill us if we do this. Hey, do you hear me, slobs? You can take this pedophile fuck redacted name out of here. You mailed bombs to your dear leader's house, you fucks. Let me out. I barely did anything wrong. JG. Shut the fuck up, you pig. FD. You all are going to split my head open. Day 9, the researchers reported that the men had begun whispering their grievances about their fellow captives, evoking perverted invitations to join them in the gas. One of the researchers, a junior, remarked in a poetic diatribe that the men felt like sirens to him. I didn't bother to read that long-winded rant, but he seemed off-put by the men's conduct. Another researcher speculated it was just a trick of the gas the subjects were breathing. I didn't know what to make of it either when this stuff first came to my office. Day 10 was the day hell seemed to break forth in that little cell. FD began to scream bloody murder, bouncing off the walls or more. They said he was slamming his head into them till it bled. He knocked himself out twice. Woke up to do it a third or more. It was this way for 3 hours, and he did that until his voice gave, and the effort to scream brought up a bloody coughing fit. He'd scream through that coughing fit anyways. One of the researchers shakily scrawled that he had painted his shirt red with his efforts. I remember it felt excessive for 10 days. I guess whatever it was they were giving these men didn't even let their brain drift off for a moment. I remember looking into how sleep even worked to review these findings. Micro sleeps protect the brain from damage after too long without actual rest. Parts of the brain shutting down to spare themselves from rot. Attempts to sleep, which the men had made, provide substantial benefits even if one fails to fall asleep. They must not have even gotten that. Seemed hellish at the time I read it. Paused the flow of the gas and pulled him aside for an examination. Had to restrain him with the help of military police. His throat was all tore up inside and he concussed himself, they found. The risk to his life was to, if he was to continue, seemed to have been hand-waved by the bastards. They sent him back in with a bag of ice that he reportedly used to bludgeon himself with. They didn't mention where he had hurt himself with it. Didn't care to. Weirdly enough, I remember they noted the other test subjects didn't care either. They kept whispering their so-called siren songs to the mics, according to the lead researcher. The reverence the team held for this behavior became apparent to me by that point. They seemed convinced that these men had been taken by something. JG also began to howl later that 10th day. Sometime in the night, one of the researchers documented that the men who had remained silent began to defecate on the floor rather than use the toilet. They then disassembled a section of their provided reading materials. The torn pages and the feces they pasted over the observation window till it was obstructed in full. The screamers shushed, and the whisperers did too. Researcher who noted this said they felt that the sirens had no need to call to them anymore. He said they'd gotten exactly what they needed. I remember having no doubt in his observation, yet not knowing why. He reported that he ordered the immediate removal of the pages from the observation window, but that, for a reason that's just beyond me, he wrote it was unsafe for military personnel to remove the feces and paper coverings without compromising the experiment or causing undue harm to the subject. Undue harm. Events day 10 prompted secondary sanitation attempt of the room on day 11. Same damn reason it was given that day too. This set the precedent for them exclusively using sound in the readings from their pre-established monitoring to report on the proceedings from here. They hadn't been hearing anything from inside, and they started doing compulsory mic checks on the dot of each hour. 5 men, they couldn't even pick up on breathing on the mics, or let alone a scuff or any kind of other sign of life. I found that as strange as they did. At this point, I shared it with a buddy at a sanity check my thoughts on the whole mess. She didn't seem any less off-put than me. Day 11 flowed into 12, then 13. Nothing new being reported. Radio silence from within the chamber. It had been noting over these 3 days that they had noticed the subjects were using enough oxygen to each be running a 72-hour-long marathon. No breaks. Chamber was checked for any kind of leak in its air seals that might explain the reading, but no leaks were reported. Day 14, they began prodding for a response from the men inside in an attempt to ascertain the mental status of the subjects. They were using the intercom for this. They reported using everything from a simple line of questions to music to blaring alarms and all the way to personalized abuses. The men remained unresponsive inside. At this point, I gathered that there was a sort of fear gripping the researchers. They seemed unwilling to even ask military police standard to cell, citing the case of requesting medical leave from one of the MPs that entered the chamber to remove the fecal matter and paper from the walls before. Orders from on high demanded they ensure the experiment's integrity in spite of the risks to the health of the officers, as they had reported about the staff health concerns and their suspicions that the microphones weren't working as intended. Included in their findings was a transcript of an encounter they had on the 15th day. Dr. Karamov: we will be opening the test chamber to ensure the audio recording equipment is functioning properly. You all must stand back from the door and lay flat on your stomachs. Interlace your fingers over your heads. Do not move or you will be met with lethal force. We'll be pausing the flow of the gas shortly to conduct our testing. Unknown subject: we no longer want to be free. It's in my account of this transcript that I'm realizing I remember some aspects of this intel clear as day. The researchers had reported their findings at this point to the Soviet military. Some kind of discord between them about the ethics of this research started to brew, but, well, I had a hard time concluding the exact nature of the researchers' objections and the top brass's demands. I imagine it's much the same argument as the one they had down the line about this research. Grim little consequence of the subject's words that day was that the researchers were satisfied with the function of the microphones, so the experiment was allowed to continue. Over the course of the following days, leading up to the 21st, the researchers started to notice signs of life disappearing from within. One less mouth taking in oxygen on the 19th, 2 less on the 20th. Their experiment was a failure. 1 minute after midnight, they called it. 4th man had stopped consuming oxygen. The chamber was flushed with gas, and the remaining subject protested as if they were holding a gun to his wife's head. Military police were yet again sent in to retrieve the last living man. I remember reading Dr. Karamov's written account that was included with the final batch of documents to land on my desk. It was my clearest recollection of the stated events. I don't remember any other piece of the intel I've gotten over the years as clearly as this. He says, quote, "We sent the soldiers in to retrieve a single man. I do not think I'll forget what we have seen. Our junior, Dr. Kalashnikov, saw it first. Made a mess of his mask. He vomited all through it and hobbled out of the chamber, whimpering like a kicked dog. I peeked inside, and I too had to vomit. I was able to steel myself long enough not to send my own vomit back into my face, but I wasn't prepared for the second bout of nausea that hit me when I saw the state of these men. The chamber stank of innards, not of feces, but of innards. I've never smelled them before today, and I'll never smell anything but them again. The men had committed a bizarre ritual upon themselves that left only one alive. How he had pleaded so fervently to be immersed in the gas that led him down this path I do not know. I don't think I'll ever be able to fathom it. He was saying, 'Put it back on, I need it, I need it.' Gathered only half of the sight of it before I vomited again and got the burning acids in my stomach and my eyes and had to leave. I did my best to spare my colleagues the sight, but they were curious enough to look inside the chamber anyway. The men had used parts of their bodies to clog the shower drain, and their blood had mixed in with the water. Why, I do not know. They had starved themselves past the first 7 days, and they left their rations untouched despite their having trashed the chamber. I've spoken to the infirmary, and they've confirmed a pattern of self-injury in pursuance of ritualistic mutilation, using only their hands as the implement. They received some kind of unholy inspiration for this self-abuse. Medical has informed me that they practice the rest of their ritual to perfection by going down the line, one after the other, to practice these steps. 1. Flaying of the skin and muscles surrounding the rib cage. The first man had died at this step. 2. Removal of the digestive tract from the abdomen. The second subject was lost here. He'd eviscerated his colon by mistake. 3. Removal of all the other organs in the internal cavity with the exception of the heart and lungs. The third had accidentally lacerated his liver. 4. Displaying out of all the bodily organs in the display. A clear attempt was made by the fourth subject to maintain the integrity of his organs and blood vessels. An aneurysm of an artery was the cause of death. 5. Survived the ritual and cannibalized himself. The fifth man was found this way alive and passing his own flesh through his digestive tract. This was not what we had in mind for these men when we devised this experiment. Their records showed that there was a fierce debate over who should be tasked with removing the bodies and handling the medical transport of the remaining subject. Through this all, it was reported that the remaining subject demanded to be supplied with more gas and the experiment be resumed. He made all kinds of accurate, personalized threats against the staff, things he shouldn't and couldn't have known, weaponized against them. I'll spare details, but he graphically threatened multiple soldiers with the molestation of family members. An attempt to remove the man from the chamber resulted in minor physical injuries to one of the soldiers, but records showed a degree of psychological distress was reported by most of the men who handled transporting the subject, identified by his initials as FK, to the infirmary. In the effort to sedate and restrain FK, a paralytic was used. It did inevitably put him under arrest. The final report notes that he struggled to move while the soldiers waited for it to take effect. His spleen had received a mild laceration from his thrashing. He was loaded onto a stretcher, which I hesitate to imagine the logistics of, and found his way into surgery. There, it was reported that the paralytic wore off quickly. He consequently fractured the arm of the surgeon in a struggle. He apparently refused anesthesia and been restrained. I'm unsure of exactly how he could have broken free of those restraints, or why his medical autonomy was respected when he was in no state of mind that could be called right. I imagine it makes more sense being there and having to do it yourself. The struggle involved in his efforts to break his restraints was noted to have caused massive bodily injury. "I shot it," wrote Dr. Karamov. I don't know the order of events that led to this, but for one reason or another, Dr. Karamov had ended up in the surgical theater in the midst of a blind rage. I shot that satanic fiend. It laughed at me. I shot it more. I must have fired 16 times and it still hadn't died. So I put it to sleep, while the machine tied to its heart didn't shut up until I did. Even then, it had to mock me. I asked it what it was before it fell asleep. I said, "I demand it. Tell me." And it said, "We are you. Just you." And the state had the audacity to strip my licensure and discredit me. "I made their wildest dreams come true," he said. "They could do it again if they wanted, the bastards. I made their soldiers into gods." I did the math on the capacity of those single-stack Makarov magazines. I can't say I blame him for his conduct. I doubt I'd have done anything different. I saw they had a spat over the potential of the project. Karamov's rant details the consequences of that spat. The Union saw this as a pilot experiment for a promising technology. Karamov ruined the whole thing with his incompetence. Never mind that this whole farce was an intellectual miscarriage. Yeah, never mind that. There are talks of the broader experiment being moved to the heart of Siberia. Obviously, we can't get any data from them, so I never got to subject myself to more of that morbid curiosity that still eats at me. Part of me felt it deeply wrong to send this up the chain back when I did it, but it was a powerful finding. I could certainly see its merits. I saw Americans who didn't need to be sent home in a box. I saw mothers who could rest easy knowing their sons and daughters would outlive them. The upper crust didn't seem to think so. Said they already knew about it, that it was a dead end. I was paid a visit later, but hey, it's been 30 years. Coming about on that long. They don't own me. Hi, so how was it? Go ahead and tell me how my character voice was, whether or not it was a terrible southern accent. Also, give me some feedback on the writing itself if you want to. I'm fresh off doing the voicing for that character, so I may accidentally slip back into it. But anyways, let me know what you thought of this rewrite of the Russian sleep experiment.